Welcome to You've Got This with Sarah Hamaker, a podcast to encourage and equip moms along their parenting journey. Join Sarah each week as she interviews dads and moms like you and discusses the joys, challenges, and rewards of raising kids.
Hi, and welcome to this week's You've Got This. I'm your host, Sarah Hamaker, and with me today I have Amy Tol, who writes at morelikgrace.com, and where she helps women connect with God's grace amidst the noise of everyday life. She lives in Michigan with her husband, Brian, and two wonderful tween kids. And when she's not writing, Amy enjoys connecting with friends over coffee and chocolate. I love that combination. Reading books while curled up under a blanket. It's cold here in Virginia today, and I wish I had a cat on my lap as we do this interview. And all matter of crafty endeavors. So welcome, Amy.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you.
Yeah, today, Amy and I are going to talk a little bit about time management and organization for moms. And before you run away from the podcast thinking, I cannot organize myself, I found that we often keep ourselves too busy. And sometimes that's the reason we can't stay organized. We try to pack too much in a day. I well remember when my kids were little and my husband would come home from work. I was privileged to be a stay-at-home mom. And he's like, so what'd you do today? And I'm like, I didn't sit down all day, but I don't know what the day went. And usually it was just, trying to make sure the kids didn't kill each other and were still alive when he came home. So, but I don't think my days were atypical. And even now, my to-do list is, a mile long. Why do we want to stay too busy? Why do we feel like we have to stay too busy?
Yeah, okay. I can very much identify with the story of the husband coming home and just like, what have you been up to? And I don't know, but the day just vanished, right?
Yes.
As far as busyness, I think a lot of it's just the culture we live in. Like, we just glorify business or busyness, I think, in American culture. It's kind of like you need to have all these accomplishments behind your name for people to, give you respect. And so I think a lot of times we just feel like we need to add all of this stuff to prove our worth, sometimes even to ourselves, we can fall into that thinking. So I know I have definitely struggled with that. And it's definitely contributed to busyness in my life.
Yeah. And I think that so many times, when you're talking to someone new, meeting another new woman, and they're like, well, what do you do? And sometimes I feel like if, quote unquote, all we do is take care of our children, or perhaps we actually homeschool, or something that's more related to our kids, I think we feel like maybe we're not worth something. Yeah.
It feels like it's not enough. I can remember getting that question because I was a stay-at-home mom with my kids when they were little too. And going to like my husband's work Christmas party, I always dreaded it because I knew that question was coming.
Yes.
And a lot of the other wives were like working and, doing all these amazing things in the world. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just managing chaos at home, but it keeps me busy. Yeah.
Right. And I think that part of the thing that, I often talk to moms about is the fact that just because we're home with our kids doesn't mean that we're not interesting people.
Oh, right? Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. That's so easy to feel like you're reduced to just your kids. But yeah, we absolutely have other interests and things going on. It's just we don't always have the time maybe to pursue it as much as we would like, especially when we have littles, I think, at home. That's a real struggle.
Yeah. And I think, too, that sometimes when we do have the little ones at home and we have to do such physical care for them, changing diapers, cutting up food, getting bottles or breastfeeding or however, all those things. And then as the kids get older, sometimes we forget to transition out of that constant care mode and realize that, we probably do have some time in the day to pursue maybe some hobbies, maybe some work at home, maybe even starting to, get ready to go back into the workforce. Do you have any tips on how to make that kind of transition as our kids move into like preschool years, and how to kind of recover that time for yourself?
Yeah, that is such an important point to make, because to be really honest with you, I struggled very much with that transition of all of a sudden my kids were in school during the days. And in some ways, like, I didn't have as much time as I thought I was going to, because you still have all the life stuff, but I did have more time. And I just felt like I was not prepared for that shift in motherhood myself. Like, I kind of wish somebody had told me, hey, this is going to come. You are going to have space to, find a little corner of life to do something again. So I guess just a little encouragement, maybe even to moms who aren't there yet, just to know it's coming and to be thinking about that, like what you might want to do in that space. And I think you just have to start maybe by getting to know yourself again, because I know sometimes you can lose a little bit of that sense of self when you have those little kids. And so just to give yourself a little time, you don't have to jump right into something, the minute your kids are off to school. It's okay to take a little time to process. And yeah, what is important to you? What would you like to pursue?
Right. And I think one of the ways that, moms of young kids can do that is to use some of the wonderful electronic resources we have that allow us to listen to podcasts about topics that interest them, or to check out, books from the library, audiobooks or e-reader books too, that you can kind of take and read little snatches to kind of think about. You can read about hobbies, you can read about potential, you can learn a new language. There's lots of little things that we can kind of do just as our kids get a little older to kind of prepare ourselves for when all of a sudden, we have a couple hours to ourselves. I have 4 kids, and I remember when my youngest was in preschool and all his older siblings were in school, and I suddenly had like 3 hours, like 3 days a week that I didn't have a kid at home. And it was like, wow. Of course, those 3 hours, like you said, go by like in a flash. Yeah. But I had been prepared for that. I had been thinking about that. I had been kind of getting some ducks in a row so that I could start to use that to do some of the things that brought me joy, that brought me comfort. So that, I think that's an important point. So moms out there, start thinking about what you want to do when your kids are in school. And if your kids are already in school, I encourage you to set aside time each week to kind of think about anything else you might want to do besides, like you said, all those life issues like laundry and running to the grocery store and cooking and all those things.
Well, and the wonderful part is you mentioned podcasts, which I'm a big fan of too, because those are things you can listen to while you're doing some of that other stuff. So that's a great way to just stay connected to issues outside of your home and just explore and learn more about the world around us.
I know. Isn't that great? You can keep it in your pocket and just, pop in those earbuds and listen. And so when I talk about time management to moms, it's often like, well, they don't know where the day went. And much like we encourage people to, well, I don't encourage, I'm not a financial manager, but financial managers, they encourage people to do a budget, and to do a budget, you have to know where your money's going. Yeah. And many times they'll say, well, you need to record everything you spend for a week or a month. And I think the same is with our time, because often we kind of joked earlier about how when our kids were little, at the end of the day, we're like, we don't know what happened, but we were busy all day. But I think when their kids are older, I think we can still have days like that. How do you recommend, or any tips on how to figure out where all that time went?
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing that's just really important is try to get it out of your head. I know for me, so much of like my to-do list, it's overwhelming if I don't get it out somewhere. So I once a week just sit down, and usually it's Monday mornings, just get that list out of my head and onto paper. And then I can kind of from there start to assign it to certain days of the week. I find that that's a really important step for me too, because if I just have one massive to-do list, I feel completely overwhelmed, and I can get to Friday and feel like, I didn't get any of it done,
Right.
But when I kind of chunk it out and I'm like, okay, well, Wednesday's a bad day because we've got ortho appointments and work and, you can figure out what days will work to do what tasks. And that way you're just kind of going at a few things at a time. And for me, that's really a huge help and actually helping me to get things done and get it out of my head, get it onto paper.
Yeah. And Amy, I highly, recommend that as well. And usually for me on Sunday nights, I sit down with my Google Calendar and go through the week. And I put, certain days, I have appointments, certain days where I have a standing gig like piano lessons. Mm-hmm. And then we recently actually added a small whiteboard to our family home, and my oldest daughter, because her handwriting is better than mine, she'll list the things that the family needs to know about, like any appointments the kids may have.
Oh, that's
go
great.
on there. Any appointments that that mom and dad are going to be out in the evening, or a kid's going to be out in the evening, and that has really helped a lot. To kind of reorder our life. And also I found that at the end of the day or at the end of the week, when I look back over those to-do lists, to give myself grace for the things I didn't do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it feels so good to cross things off the list, doesn't it? I mean, that's the best thing ever.
That's my favorite thing.
But you're right. I mean, it's rare is the week where you're actually able to cross off every single thing. And I think just to recognize that's life. And I think part of the reason that happens is because we're just being good moms and good friends, right? Like we're taking space when our kids need a little extra help. That might take a little extra time. But I'd much rather invest my energy being present for the people I love than just getting through my list,
Right. And and to be honest, I really struggled with that. I've always been a list maker. I know some of us are more list makers than others, but especially when my kids were younger and I had this great to-do list for the week. And then I get the call from school that one of my kids is sick.
Oh,
right.
Yes.
And then I'm driving to school and I'm trying not to be upset because it's not their fault they threw up in the cafeteria or whatever, And I'm trying not to go, oh, now it's all derailed. And I think what has really helped me to kind of reorient my thinking is to look at each day as a gift from God. And when I focus on that and then something happens to derail that, a kid is sick, somebody needs something that I didn't think they were going to need. Mm-hmm. I forgot an appointment that now I have to take someone to or go to or whatever, just to go, okay, this is God's kind providence in my life this week or today. And I am accomplishing exactly what I need to accomplish, even if nothing on my to-do list is crossed off.
For sure. Well, and I think something that can help with that is as we schedule out our lives, I think just to remember that unexpected things are going to happen and we need to schedule a little white space in our lives so that we have room for those things. I mean, you can't always know when things are going to arise, but I just remember hearing a teaching at church a while back about the idea of margin and having some breathing room in our schedules. And that really struck me at the time because I was not living that way at all. My days felt like dominoes, right? Like everything had to fall just right or the whole thing was going to fall apart. And then, when you get the call from school or wherever, you just end up feeling frustrated and unable to cope with it. Whereas if I just leave a little room and expect the unexpected, then there's space for that. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah. And I love that margin, that building in that margin and allowing ourselves, the freedom to say, you know what, that item on my to-do list is not as important as playing a game right now with my kids.
Yeah.
Even though I maybe didn't schedule that game.
Yep.
And one of the things that I've recently done, the last 2 or 4 or 5 years probably, is made sure that I allow a little extra fluidity in my day when my kids come home from school.
Yeah, that's such a good time. Yes.
Yeah, just to make sure that I can be there, even though they generally don't, quote, need me. But there's going to be that one day when they had a really bad day and they just need mom. And if I haven't consistently kind of built that in, I'm going to miss that opportunity.
Yep. For sure. It's hard though. I mean, it's a real struggle because that to-do list, I mean, it's powerful. You want to get those things done. So it really is a mindset you have to build about what you're going to value most, right? Getting through that list or being there for your people. Yeah.
Right. And I think that sometimes reminding myself, people matter more than the list. And I think we know that. It might seem silly to say that, but how many times, like you said, do we operate as if that list, whether it's on paper, whether it's on our computer, whether it's in our brain, is more important than what just happened or what we need from the person standing in front of us. So what are your, do you have any top 3 tips for staying organized, and how do you not let this life kind of overwhelm you? Anything else you want to add besides what we've already talked about?
Yeah, well, like I said, I really highly recommend if you don't already get things out of your head in some way, that's just huge to me, because otherwise you live with that mental chaos all the time. So there's awesome apps. I just do pen and paper because it works for me, but somehow getting appointments in place and being able to look at it all in one place, I think that's huge. And another thing I would recommend is just to build routines where you can, because I think if you have for me, Monday is laundry day. It has been for forever. And there's also just certain times of day, after my daughter gets on the bus, I do a quick cleanup of the kitchen and get things together. And it's only 5 minutes, but it's just a built-in thing that gets my house in order, as I start my day. I think when you have those little things, it adds up, right? It helps life just to feel a little bit more manageable. And
right.
And so, yeah, I would say that's huge. And I think another thing, too, is making time to rest. For me, it was a struggle for me for a long time to actually make room for Sabbath and for rest in my life. I fought it kind of tooth and nail for a long time and was like, I have to do everything, But since I have made more space for that, it's just been incredible to me how taking that time to set work aside really does fill me up in a powerful way that helps me be even more effective and better when I plug back in. So that would be another huge thing I would encourage people to do.
So what do you do to relax? What are kind of your relaxing things?
Yes. Well, for me, one thing that's huge is just getting out in nature. I love to grab my phone so I can listen to music, put it on, get away from the noise and chaos of home and just be outside. So yeah, as winter comes, that's going to be hard because then I don't like to get out in the cold and I have to figure out something else. But yeah, for me, that's always huge. And I love just reading. I find that either reading just fiction for fun, but even there's so many good books, like you mentioned earlier, things that can just help you explore your spiritual life or the world around us. And those are really nice things to do too, I think, just as part of my relaxation time.
Yeah, I enjoy knitting as well, and so I often will do that if I'm watching, streaming a show or watching. That's always fun, and then reading too. And I find that, frankly, since we really unplugged our TV, so there's not a set time that we have to watch something, because we just do more DVDs and Prime, Amazon Prime, love that streaming capability has really helped me to, kind of free up my evenings so that I don't always work as much as I used to, because I work from home. And for those of you who do that, know how easy it is to have that spill over into all kinds of crazy stuff. But to really make sure that I have that disconnect from technology and that relaxation, I think, can be key to helping our minds quiet down.
Absolutely. I have found that I can't, literally just can't fall asleep. If I try to just keep going until bedtime, that does not work for me.
Right. And there have been, I think, studies that show that we do need that compression time. Well, this has been great, Amy. Thank you so much for joining me today. You've been listening to You've Got This with Sarah Hamaker and my guest, Amy Tol, who writes at morelikgrace.com. I hope you join me next week.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast of You've Got This with Sarah Hamaker. Sign up to receive notification of new podcasts and listen to previous editions at sarahhamaker.com. Until next time, remember, parenting might be hard sometimes, but don't worry, you've got this.